I heard a lot of you don't know how to use prop to mesh. So I'm gonna show you how to use it and even how to import OBJ models, object models from Blender. Left click with the tool to spawn a P2M entity, and I can right click it, and then left click with their controllers. I can scroll to pick which controllers I'm gonna use. I can use the context menu to open them up like this and change the settings. So I can take a prop, I can select it with right click, and then I can right click on a controller, for example controller 2, and it's gonna create a mesh out of my prop. I can take another prop, and if I hold shift I can add another mesh. See, it changes. I can add another mesh to an existing mesh, and I can take another model and I can mesh it to the third controller like that. Every controller has its own materials like that, their own color, even alpha channels work. Each controller has controller specific settings, like the position, scale, offsets, the color of the material. We've already set that. You can set the texture size of the UV map, so play around with that. And under MDL I can see the two models in this specific controller, right? I can remove them, I can edit them separately. For example, I can move this. If I change the value and press enter, it's gonna, apply that value and turn blue. So there you go. I can move specifically each model. Like that. And then if I change, for example, the scale on a controller, it's gonna scale all the models in that controller. Alright, it's gonna scale these two together because they're in the same controller. If I want to import models, I gotta be careful, because prop to mesh has a triangle limit of 20,000 triangles. So if I try and import this model, which has a lot more than 20,000 triangles, you'll see that it's gonna start artifacting. Now, as for these settings, if you're importing OBJs directly from Blender, you might want to consider using render invert, because usually the normals in Blender are completely inverted when they're imported into prop to mesh. You just take that, and if I put this render smooth at 30, it's going to be about the same as setting the auto smooth function in Blender to 30. So they're kind of similar. They're not quite the same, but they're quite close. And render inside, it's gonna render normals inside as well as the outside. It's gonna half your triangle limit. It's 20,000. If you render inside, it's gonna be 10,000. So use it carefully. So if I import this model, which is, by the way, a lot more than 20,000 triangles, it's gonna start artifacting, and it's gonna look like shit. Okay, this is what the model is actually supposed to look like. It's an Audi A8 I modeled a few weeks ago, and if you check it, it's got a lot of controllers. For example, this is the body controller. It has just the body mesh. Alright, I can color it separately. And then the second one is the rubber mesh, which, you know, if I do this, see, this is all the rubber bits that are supposed to be like black or whatever. Then as for the steering wheel is also a P2M controller, see, which gets parented via E2 and then gets, you know, turned into a functional steering wheel. Wheels are also prop to mesh, parented to the actual physical wheel. This is an ACF car, by the way. So, you know, if you plan on importing Forza models, you really gotta cut them up. Now, the problem with Forza models is that they're very high poly. Any kind of racing game uses very, very high poly models, which, you know, garrysmod, let alone an add-on for garrysmod, can't really render easily. So you either gotta cut them up or choose a different model. Also be aware, if you go onto a server and spawn a car with 80 prop to mesh controllers, everybody's gonna hate you. You're gonna look like a complete clown for not taking the time to actually making something yourself. When I make these models, I tend to be conservative with the amount of detail I use, specifically because it's not very pleasant to wait for 600 years for a model to show up in game. But anyway, that's prop to mesh. Check the description and the comments for more tips, stuff I forgot to mention while filming, and I'll see you next time.